Encounter Church. We are so happy that you are here. Welcome to all that are in the room and tuning in online. We are going to wash up our weeks with some praise and worship. So we invite you to stand and join us. Step out of the shadows, step out of the grave, break into the wild, and don't be afraid. Run into wide open spaces, graces waiting for you. Dance like the weight has been lifted, graces waiting. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, there is freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, there is freedom. Come out of the dark, just as you are, into the fullness of His love. Oh, the Spirit is here, let there be freedom. Let there be freedom. Bring all of the burdens, bring all of the scars. Come back to communion, come back to the start. Run into wide open spaces, graces waiting for you. Dance like the weight has been lifted, graces waiting. Where the Spirit of the Lord, there is freedom, there is freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord, there is freedom, there is freedom. Come out of the dark, just as you are, into the fullness of His love. Oh, the Spirit is here, let there be freedom. Let there be freedom. Yeah. Chains will fall, prisons shake at the sound of Jesus' name. Lives made whole, hearts awake at the sound of Jesus' name. Chains will fall, prisons shake at the sound of Jesus' name. Lives made whole, hearts awake at the sound of Jesus' name. Where the Spirit of the Lord, there is freedom, there is freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord, there is freedom, there is freedom. Come out of the dark, just as you are, to the fullness of His love. Oh, the Spirit is here, let there be freedom. Let there be freedom. The weight has been lifted, graces waiting. Dance like the weight has been lifted, graces waiting. Dance like the weight has been lifted, promises waiting. Dance like the weight has been lifted, 'cause he did it. Yes, he did it. Oh, dance like the weight has been lifted. Grace is waiting. Where the Spirit of the Lord, there is freedom. There is freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. There is freedom. Come out of the dark, just as you are, into the fullness of His love. Oh, the Spirit is here, let there be freedom. Let there be freedom. Let there be Who else would rocks cry out to worship? His glory taught the stars to shine. Perhaps creation longs to have the words to sing, but this joy is mine. With 1,000 hallelujahs, we magnify your name. You alone deserve the glory, the honor, and the praise. Lord Jesus, this song is forever yours. 1,000 hallelujahs and 1,000 more. Who else would die for our redemption? Whose resurrection meets our rise? There isn't time enough to sing of all you've done, but I have eternity to try. With 1,000 hallelujahs, we magnify your name. You alone deserve the glory,
don't need an explanation. If you tell me move, I don't need the destination. If what's promised I never see, I'm still walking with you. You're still walking with me. Hey, hey. Oh, you will redeem all the time spent wandering. You've been the fire and the cloud I'm following. You made a way out of bondage and darkness just yesterday. So today, if I hear you speak, I don't need an explanation. If you tell me move, I don't need the destination. If what's promised I never see, I'm still walking with you. You're still walking with me. And if I know one thing, God is a deliverer. If I know one thing, our God is gonna see us through. If I know one thing, our God is a deliverer. If I know one thing, our God is gonna see us through. If I know one thing, our God is a deliverer. If I know one thing, our God is gonna see us through. If I know one thing, our God is a deliverer. If I know one thing, our God is gonna see us. He'll see us through. Yes, He will. He'll see us through. Never alone in the battle. He'll see us through. Never alone in the desert. He'll see us through. Never alone in the fire. He'll see us through. He'll see us through. He'll see us through. Never alone in the water. He'll see us through. Never alone in depression. He'll see us through. Never alone in addiction. He'll see us through. Oh, yes, He will. He'll see us through. Yes, He will. He'll see us through. And all our anxiety, oh, I know. He'll see us through. In our darkest thoughts, I know Jesus. He'll see us through. Never in circumstance, so I know. He'll see us through. Oh, yes, He will. He'll see us through. Oh, if I know one thing, our God is a deliverer. And if I know one thing, our God is gonna see us through. If I know one thing, our God is a deliverer. If I know one thing, our God is gonna see us. He'll see us through. You may be seated.
Hello, it's me, your money. Let's talk, shall we? Ooh, look, your package came today. I can't wait to find out what we ordered. I'm sure you can't either. Look what I found. Remember this? A penny saved is a penny earned. Hello? Anybody in there? Echoey. Just look at them all. We're rich. I don't like the word hoarder. I prefer the term saving visionary. Who needs a 401k when this buried treasure could be worth something one day? And this. Yes, this. Worth every penny.
The month of March called Money Talks. And to kind of kick us off, I want to tell you the story about this guy here. There wasn't a lot of pictures of him on the internet. He lived kind of a little bit of a quieter life. His name was Ronald Reed, and Ronald passed away about a decade ago in 2014. And Ronald was a unique individual. He lived in Vermont. He had spent about 40 years working 2 different jobs, car mechanic and a janitor at JCPenney. He would drive his kind of second hand-me-down car every single day to both jobs. He was able to keep his car running because of his mechanic skills. And when he passed away in 2014, something extraordinary kind of came out. You see, in 2014, 2,813,503 people died. And there were 4,000 people amidst that group that had one thing in common, and Ronald was one of them. And the thing was that no one knew this unique trait shared by only 4,000 people that year was something that Ronald had until the family arrived and his will was opened. And they discovered that Ronald was part of that 4,000 group that had a net worth of over $8 million. He had lived in the same house that he had bought when he was in his 20s. He had lost his wife when he was in his 50s, never remarried. His friends would say his greatest, most favorite activity was chopping firewood. And yet, when he passed away and they opened up his will, the family members found that he had left $2 million for them and $6 million for the library and for the hospital that he visited frequently. Not for medical procedures, but for their cafe, where he loved to sit at the same counter and drink coffee every day and connect with his friends. See, Ronald understood something. Ronald actually had a secret that over the course of this month, I want to kind of unpack for you, that Dallas and I want to share with you, something that Ronald knew and did that for many of us is a little bit of a challenge. Money is one of those awkward things, right? It's one of those few taboo things that you're really not supposed to ask. In fact, if you're ever at a dinner party and you're meeting someone and you're kind of getting to know someone, you never ask the question, oh, that sounds like an interesting job. How much do they pay you? How much do you make a year? Right? Like, that's just one of those weird statements. And then even it's possible to grow up in a household and never know what your parents make and never know how they managed money. Money is just one of those awkward conversations, and it's an even more awkward part of just adulting in the course of life. And yet, it's everywhere, and it affects everything. Money is at the center of our biggest dreams and our greatest frustrations and fights. It's done amazing things to make the world a better place. And it's been the thing that ripped families apart. Which is no surprise then that money is something worth talking about. And it's not a surprise that Jesus, out of the 38 parables, and this number's debatable, there's a range that people argue from 36 to 50 plus, but it's generally agreed upon that there was about 38 parables specifically that Jesus taught. And 16 out of those 38 parables had money or possession as a part of the narrative plot. And the reason why is because money affects everything. You use it every single day, or you're used by it every single day. And for us to really move towards the life that God is inviting all of us into, for that freedom to begin to flow in our finances, I think it's important that we actually open up a little bit and be willing to press into maybe some of those harder places, because here's the thing, financial freedom never happens by accident. No one goes and discovers their savings account one day is $100,000 just accidentally, that they're out of debt just accidentally. And so this is why I think Jesus talked about it so much. He understood it is the oil that makes the engine of life move, and that it's really important, and how we manage it has a huge impact on the life that we live. Which is why Paul, who follows along and has the mantle of being the kind of chief messenger of Christianity, makes it a point to talk about money. In fact, he writes a letter to his mentee, his protege named Timothy. And in one of the two letters that he writes, he's instructing Timothy in this specific longer passage in chapter 6 in the first letter that he writes to help guide Timothy to how to talk about money for this thing called the church, because Christianity is brand new and there's a lot of wow around Christianity. There's a lot of amazement of the miracles that have happened and the freedom people are finding and just the joy and the peace that's beginning to flow. And there's a very intentional hunger for the how of Christianity. How does Christianity affect and flow into every area of my life? And Paul says to Timothy in the section I want to look at today, here's what I want you to instruct the church around money. And the first thing that Paul opens with is a little different than how you and I would start the discussion, maybe if you were sitting down with your kids or a best friend who came to you looking for money advice. Paul starts at a very different starting point, a place, honestly, and actually, that's, I think, critical to the story that Ronald lived out. It's probably his secret. You find it in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 6, and it's in the Encounter Church Bible app, our Encounter Church app. It's already loaded in the Bible and the message note sections if you want to follow along and take notes today. But Paul, kind of pivoting towards the money section of the letter to Timothy, makes this opening statement: godliness with contentment is great gain. He's transitioning out of this discussion and temptation because Timothy lives in an area that's fairly affluent. His church has a mixture of people who were really affluent and really poor. And in some ways, it's hard to wrap our mind around because all of us experience, no matter how financially well or poor you may feel like you are on the spectrum, all of us experience life today in a way that royalty 100 years ago wished they could have had it. Right? And so it can be sometimes difficult to jump into another box, but understand that the disparity between the rich and the poor 2,000 years ago was really harsh and really distinct. And Timothy's got this unique challenge. He's pastoring a church in an area where there's a lot of affluence, there's a lot of money. And Paul says to Timothy, hey, one of the things that I want you to encourage them when it comes to finances and their faith as a starting point is contentment, which is a strange word. When's the last time you thought about the word contentment? Because there's nothing in this culture that reinforces contentment. Everything in our culture, everything in our economic system is predicated on you being discontent, right? Oh, your iPhone is the 12? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. You know, it's like you don't have the latest model. I mean, marketing is driven by convincing you and I to be discontent with what we have. I mean, that is a marketer's job. That whatever year it is, whatever model it is, it's not as good as it could be. And not only is that playing out, that's the water that we all swim in. Most of us have inhaled that water without even realizing it, or have friends who are inhaling that water, and their social media feeds project that same, I want to make people feel like I'm doing better than they are. And so your social media streams are filled with better vacations, better looking family pictures, better houses, better cars. It's really easy in the course of just waking up in the morning to feel discontentment. But it wasn't that easy either in the first generation. If you were poor, you were constantly reminded by people who had more opulent wealth than you did. And so Paul is saying, Timothy, hey, contentment is essential. It's core, foundation. If they're going to move into finances and to do money God's way. Because contentment, and here's the thing, contentment is not the same thing as apathy. It's not the same thing as like settling for less. He actually uses an interesting word here that's pulling from a popular discussion playing out in the first century. The same word contentment can be translated self-sufficiency. It essentially means to have all the needs that you have met. He's not talking about people who are in places of extreme poverty. He's not downplaying when someone who does not have enough food to eat does not have enough food to eat. He's not saying be content with that. He's specifically calling out this popular notion in the day around this word self-sufficiency. He's like, hey, if you have what you need, like that's let's make that the aim. Because if you understand self-sufficiency, then you have a proper system to know what a need is and what a want is. Whenever I go shopping with my daughter, that's normally about 30% of our conversation because we will walk by whatever it is and she's like, I need that. And I'm like, no, you don't need that. Like, you don't need Annie Ann's. We just had lunch, right? You don't need that outfit. Like, you want that outfit. You like that outfit. You may even love the way that outfit looks, but you do not need it. You will not die if I do not buy you that thing. And the language piece is important. It's like, hey, helping her understand needs versus wants. And so Paul's not dealing a kind of a devastating blow to rich people in this passage. That's not his aim. Paul is targeting discontented people, which is a whole lot larger group of us than the wealthy. And he moves into this because he understands that no amount of behaviors, no amount of spreadsheets. In fact, what Paul understands is that money management starts with me management. It's not a spreadsheet. You don't need a better app to figure out your money. You don't need a cloud version to figure out your money. Because money management often is a problem of me management. That spreadsheet is not buying stuff on Amazon and you get packages and you're not even sure what's in it. Like, that's not the spreadsheet, right? That's you and me. The spreadsheet is not Grubhubbing. The spreadsheet may have a line item for Grubhub, but it's not the one Grubhubbing and Instacarting or eBay bidding. Me is. Me management. And that's why he starts with contentment. Because the secret is that if you can spend less, you save more. But if you desire less, you spend less. And if you can find contentment with what you have, Paul recognizes that then you can start to live and play out a financial game playbook that's completely different than the world that surrounds us. And this is what Paul understood. It's me management. And then he goes on to warn them why this is so important. He says, those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and have pierced themselves with many griefs. I mean, Paul's like, look, contentment has a lot of consequences. If you don't get this right, there is a dangerous slope on the other side. In fact, you don't keep up with this, but I keep up with this, of pastors and churches, and when there's kind of moral failures. And just in the last week, there was a church that was in New England that kind of made some headlines because the issue around money came up. You know, it's like, it's a real thing where people's faith was damaged. I mean, there are people who, when they get to know me a little bit and they start coming to the church and they become convinced I'm not a cult leader, then they become convinced like, oh, I'm actually like normal. And they start to like talk to me like I'm a normal person, because that is actually a shift that I see play out, where it's like, at first it's like, Reverend or Father Chris, and I'm like, nope, neither one of those are appropriate. You're not Ella or Henry, so you can't call me Father. That's creepy. And Reverend is not used by anyone that I know, okay? So, you know, I'm Chris. So it like eventually gets to this point, it's like, oh, like you're kind of normal. They're like, you know, honestly, like when I thought about church, you know, like people wearing suits and flying in private jets because they're like, the Spirit of God's not on Spirit Airways. I need that private jet. You know what I mean? Like they see those kind of things and they just have a box. And I'm like, yeah, I hate it too. I'm pretty sure from this passage, God hates that too. Like, because how money gets managed does sometimes have a devastating consequence on people's faith. And that was kind of my grief this week. And I was reading the headlines. I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't care about the pastor. Like, my heart was broken over all the people who I knew his faith had been damaged by what he had done. And this is the warning. He's like, look, this is really serious. And again, notice, he's not knocking money. He's not railing against the rich. His warning is in the love of money. This discontentment, this over-reliance, this lie that the love of money brings. And he says, actually, in the way he writes this sentence in the original language of the day, the first word, because in English we write subject-verb. That's typically how we write and structure our sentences. But the language Paul's writing in that period of time was a language called Greek. And ancient Greek did not arrange words in the way that we arrange them. They arranged words in the order of importance. Okay? So reading it would have sort of felt a little bit like Yoda's transcript in a training with a Jedi. Okay? It would have felt a little off, but you kind of still get the point. And the first word is a root. Because Paul is wanting Timothy to convey to the church that, like, this is why it's so important. I'm talking about contentment because I recognize that the love of money is a root that will produce devastating fruit in the lives of people. And all of us know stories of families who were completely destroyed because when someone passed away and all of a sudden there was a house where there was a little bit of money and it went to this person and not this person. Like, all of us know stories of relationships and business relationships that were damaged because of money. He's like, look, this is a root that produces all types of devastating fruit. So we need to start where the roots grow on the inside. That's why contentment is so, so important. I was reading this book recently on money, and it's super fascinating. It's written from a perspective of a guy who has been uber successful financially, and he wrote a series of short stories to capture his wisdom. And he wrote this statement that just stopped me in my tracks. He's not a Christian. He's not coming from a faith system, but he references writing a letter to his son when his son was born. And this is what he wrote. He says, you might think you want an expensive car, a fancy watch, and a huge house. But I'm telling you, you don't. What you want is respect and admiration from other people. And you think having expensive stuff will bring it. It almost never does, especially from the people you want to respect and admire you. Like I was reading, I was like, man, that is such clarity. Written by Morgan Housel. I mean, he's a father and his son has just been born. He's very financially successful, and he knows his son is going to grow up in a very financially successful bubble, and he's like, how do I convey to my son the wisdom he needs to have? And he writes this down, and I mean, I just stopped. I was like, that is so crystal clear. This is so exactly what Paul was saying, that there is a temptation that the love of money brings. Think about the things most people want. They want popularity. They want power, prominence, position, possessions. And money is one of the few things that can promise you all of them. Hey, if you want power, if you want prominence, you want people to listen to you when you open your mouth, right? Money can promise you that. There's a temptation. And Morgan's saying to his son, hey, son, there is going to be a temptation to try to get respect and admiration by using these things. And I'm just here to tell you, because I've lived enough life with those kind of things to know that that's not what those things are going to give you. And that's a temptation. But then Paul also warns Timothy to warn them that there's something more than just a temptation. The Fed, Philadelphia Fed, one of the working papers that came out in 2018 that didn't get a lot of attention but was super, super interesting was entitled Peers' Income and Financial Distress, Evidence from Lottery Winners and Neighboring Bankruptcies. Like, I don't know why that did not hit the headlines, but it should have, okay? Because this paper was very illuminating. So what the researchers did, listed on the page, to give a little shout out to the National University of Singapore and University of Alberta and the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, right? Like, what they found was they had the question, like, what happens, not to the person who wins the lottery, but to the neighborhood when someone in the neighborhood wins the lottery? So, because lotteries are public information, they looked at lotteries that had kind of payouts that were bigger than the national average salary, something that would be significant that would alter someone's lifestyle. So they took that data set, and then they compared that data set to bankruptcy records, which is also public. And then, to even be more exact, they kind of designated debt into two types of categories: visible debt and invisible debt. And what they meant by that was, like, visible debt was debt of things that would have been visible to your neighbors, like your car, or things that would have been prominent. And then there was invisible debt, stuff like buying nice furniture, things that your neighbors wouldn't know that you have necessarily. And so what they found in this exhilarating read, might I add, is that if someone in the neighborhood won the lottery, over the next 3 years, there was an increase in the number of people who would declare bankruptcy. And not only would be there an increase in bankruptcy declarations, the type of debt that would be declared in those bankruptcies were all visible debt. People would see their neighbor who's now living it up, right? Like, just experiencing the high life, and there became this downward pressure on them to buy a nicer car, to invest in nicer vacations, to do these things so that other people in the neighborhood would see. And there was a literal marked increase in the number of bankruptcies that would declare. So if you're kind of the object lesson of that is, if your neighbor ever wins the lottery, move immediately, because it's going to work out bad for someone in the neighborhood. And it might be you, so run really fast. But it's just this fascinating, this thing that what Paul understood is not just like a temptation, that there's a trap. Specifically, one of the most devastating traps that if we're not careful, one of the biggest enemies and killers of contentment is comparison. And this is the trap specifically that the Fed Bank in 2018 focused in on. And comparison is everywhere. Like, there's a healthy comparison component, right? Like, if you're walking out in the wilderness and you see a sign that says bears, it's okay to quickly say, can I outrun everyone in this group? And if I can't, can I at least outrun one other person in this group? Like, that's a healthy comparison question, because you're like, am I going to be the one that gets eaten? Nope, they run slower. I'm okay. Right? Like, that's a survival of the fittest life thing. But oftentimes, comparison is a trap for us. Think about it. Comparison is so devious because it sneaks into our lives, and not only does it rob the happiness and joy that we have with the thing that we have, or the relationships that we have, not only does it take that from us, it then hands us a lie that says the only way we'll be happy is if we get that thing that they have that we don't have. It's a double trap. And comparison, I mean, I've watched it. If you have kids and you have more than one kid, you've probably seen it play out where at Christmas time or birthday or just shopping, one kid gets something and they love it. They're like, this is the most amazing thing ever. And then they see something someone else gets. And they're like, I don't like this anymore. And they want to throw it away. And as parents who are so much wiser and smarter than them, we want to kind of like look at them and chastise them and say, you're so immature. But then we do the same thing when we scroll through Instagram. Because we were so excited about vacation that we booked. We were so excited about where we were going, and then we look and see what they're doing. Oh my goodness, look at the view from their house. Like, look at the exotic, is that a drone shot of them jumping into that water? Oh my goodness. Like, all of a sudden, what we were happy about, we start to hate. They've robbed. Comparison is a thief and a murderer. And it kills contentment. It's a trap. And if you and I are going to be people who stomp out comparison, I think you have to realize that comparison is the default. It is the fuel that marketers use. It is in the water that we swim in. And there is no filter that is going to take comparison out. You can't live a life where comparison is not going to be pushed in front of you. What you have to do is activate contentment. Right? So while I was gone over the last 2 weeks during February break, what we did was we drove south to see some family. During Christmas break, my wife and my son, my wife and my daughter both had COVID, and so my mom had flown up, and so it ended up not being the greatest week with them. They're staying in a hotel, and so we kind of had an opportunity to redo Christmas. And so we'd rented a house. We all met up there down south in North Carolina. If anybody looked at flight prices during February break, it was astronomical. Like, one flight was the cost of what all of our family normally flies. I mean, it was 4 times. It was crazy. So I was like, Jenny, neither one of our cars can handle a 1,000-mile journey, right? So, like, let's just rent a car. And the cheapest car to rent was this, a blue Tesla Y. Okay, the SUV. Now, like, this would be like my big want. Okay, and so I get in it, and I'm like, it's like, hello, Chris Kelsey. Not really, but I kind of in my mind, it's like Knight Rider, like, anyways. So I'm like, man, this car, and it's like, it's smart. Like, it warns me when the light turns green, and like, it's got karaoke in it, and so I'm like, don't stop believing. And so while I'm looking at the karaoke thing, singing it, it's got smart radar to keep me in the lines and warns me if I'm drifting out, and like a raindrop hits and the automatic windshield wipers are like, we have that, don't worry. And it's like, shh, shh. And then it just stopped. I mean, it was like the most amazing thing ever. It's like heated seats in the car. And by the way, like, you can even do practical jokes. And I love practical jokes. And like, one of them is you can actually like make it toot out of different car speakers. And so I can like literally just put the toot sound in the back seat, and driving down the road, nobody knows I've done it, and I hit it, and it's like, and my son's like, that wasn't me. And I'm like, you sure, buddy? And it's like, I mean, I am living my dream. For a whole week, I'm driving this thing around. And then this week I bring it back and I have to get into my 2003 Buick LeSabre. After driving the semi-sentient being that is the Tesla Y. Okay? Like, the Buick is not semi-sentient at all. It's semi-drivable. Okay? So I get in that thing and I'm like, huh. Like, it does nothing to help me. There is no automatic. There's no karaoke. And I'm sitting in the car and have this moment where I'm like, okay, I have a choice right now. This is literally, this is my week. I sit down in that car and I'm like, this thing is a 2003 Buick LeSabre. I just spent the week driving a 2023 Tesla Y with 11,000 miles on it. Okay. I don't feel very happy right now. I don't feel very satisfied right now. Something's got to shift because this is what I have. And before I drove the Tesla Y, I didn't have a problem with any of the problems that I was noticing in that moment. And so I'm sitting there and I'm kind of starting the car up and I'm breathing in and I realize this is my lot in life. But 2 weeks ago, I didn't see it like a lot in life. I was grateful that I had it, and it was a lot for my life to have a car that works, because that's the chief end of a car, is to move you from A to B. And so I'm sitting there, and it's like, you know what? That Tesla Y's seat wasn't that comfortable. It was brand new, leather, very smooth. But my butt didn't fit into the butt ruts the way my Buick has. And my Buick LeSabre 2003 has butt ruts. Okay, that Tesla didn't have butt ruts. You know what I'm talking about? Like where when you sit down, I've been sitting in that seat for so long, there's just ruts where my butt sits. And it's like a double safety protection. It's not just the seatbelt holding me in. If somebody hit me, there's a little bit of like friction and gravity to keep me grounded. I'm like, the Tesla didn't have butt ruts. Elon Musk didn't come up with that, you know? And when I'm driving my Buick LeSabre around, like this thing felt flimsy. Every time I closed the front, it felt thin. And I'm like, you know what? The Tesla, I couldn't murder 3 people and put them all in my trunk like I could with the Buick LeSabre. And it's got a glass in the back. How are you going to commit a crime with a Tesla Y? But you could totally do it with a Buick LeSabre. And no one has funny conversations with me. Oh, I saw you driving the Tesla today and I'll wave. Everyone always has the same conversation. Hey, I waved at 3 old people this week because I saw a Buick LeSabre and I thought it was you. I mean, like, you know the number of times old women holler at me? Like, if I ever lost Jenny, man, in the 70 to 80 camp, I have got it going on. No, I wouldn't have that with the Tesla. And so I'm like, okay, this is a good thing. And what I was doing was I was activating contentment, because what happens is that comparison robs what you have and convinces you have to have that to be happy. But gratitude returns you back to what you have. And you start to look for the good in it and celebrate it. And one of the best ways to fight comparison is to celebrate what you see that others have. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. That looks like an amazing vacation that you guys had. We have one this summer we're looking forward to too. I hope we make some of the same memories that you guys made. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited about that new car. You'll have to give me a ride in it sometimes. That looks so cool. Maybe one day when this car finally stops going, I'll have to, look at that model now because I've never really paid attention to it before. Celebrate them. Oh my goodness, I can't believe you got that award. Can't believe you got that raise. Celebrate what others have. Don't let it become about what you don't have. And then be grateful for what you do. Because there was a point in time in your life at some previous moment where that version of you would slap you with what you have today. There's something in your life that you have that the previous 5 months, 10 years ago version of you would have been like, what? We're rich. We make that much money? That's what gratitude does, is it grounds you. It's like the butt rut. It just helps you settle down. Okay? It reminds you, like, man, I've got good things in my life. And that by doing that, we can actually foster and fight for contentment and be grateful for what we have and celebrate what others have. But Paul actually doesn't just end with that. He puts another passage, and it's, I think, really, really critical, especially if you're a Christ follower. Like everything I've said up to this point, regardless of where you stand on faith, what you believe about Christianity, it's helpful and it's hopeful for you where you are, period. But Paul actually goes beyond that, because ultimately his advice is rooted in the Christian worldview and understanding who Jesus is and what Jesus has done. And in my backpack, I carry around just like a few things. I'm slightly strange. But one of them is this. It is a Roman coin. It's about 1,800 years old. This is what you would have been paid for a half day of work. And this is always in my backpack. And part of the reason why is it's a reminder to me to keep perspective. Because you could make an argument in the top 5 human civilizations throughout human history, the Roman Empire is definitely top 5. We're living in another one of the top 5s in the United States of America right now. But there was nothing civilizationally speaking that compared to the Roman Empire for thousands of years. I mean, they completely, you can make an argument about certain dynasties in China, but like the Roman Empire was massive and was innovative and pioneered what we talked about a few weeks ago, concrete, before concrete was a thing, right? And yet this coin, which would have gotten you stabbed in certain streets in Rome at night, sits in my backpack and it's worthless today. I can buy nothing with this thing. The only thing that it has value-wise is the novelty that this is a coin that's over 1,800 years old. And that I held something that was from the Roman Empire. But it reminds me that oftentimes I'm so consumed with something that one day will be a novelty for someone else. Or it'll be someone else's trash. Right? This is what Paul says. He says, for godliness with contentment is great gain. For, and the word can be translated because, we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. Like there's just a groundedness that Paul is saying, hey, the reason we can push towards contentment, one of the reasons we can challenge people for contentment is because of Christ and what he did. And that money and its best accomplishment, its greatest feat will always be what it can buy you in the temporary. But money doesn't give you eternal life. Money doesn't give you peace and joy that surpasses all circumstances. Right? Having money may give you more options when you're sitting across from a doctor who says it's cancer and it's terminal. But it cannot buy you the peace that Jesus brings when you know that he has you in the palm of his hand, regardless of what happens to you. Money can give you a lot of things, but the thing it cannot give you is what Jesus can give you. And Paul's like, we have a perspective of life that gives us an ability to detach, to devalue in a healthy way what so many people obsess with. Because everything that you own will one day end up in some trash pit or some recycled form of something else. And he's like, just keep in mind, the way you came in is the way you're going to leave. So when Ronald Reed died, the $8 million he had, he didn't take with him. He left it behind. And he did good with that money. Again, Paul wasn't knocking being rich. He was knocking being discontented and disoriented with the grander perspective. The grander perspective of who Jesus is and what he's done on the cross, and ultimately what the resurrection brings to us, and the perspective that it gives us. He's like, it fosters an even greater contentment. Not apathy. He's not knocking ambition. He's not saying, oh, well, contentment means that this is all I got and I'm okay for the rest of my life. That's not what this type of contentment is about. So I told you I rented a Tesla. So one of the things that you should know that we discovered is that my son, when we get back, we discover, actually before we even start to drive back, that my son is essentially Banksy. He decided that the interior of that Tesla needed a customized upgrade in 4 places with a marker. He had decided that the car needed to be spruced up with the light gray interior and the dark green ink. And so I see it as we're packing up to drive back to Massachusetts, and my mouth falls to the floor. Jenny was like, did you see? I was, and then I had to apologize to my son because he realized oh, junk, I just did something really bad. And it was like, bam, 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 bam. It was 4, and not just 4 different locations, multiple types of surfaces. So Jenny's researching on the way home, how do you get it out of this surface? And how do you get it off of this surface? And, it's what works for this surface does not work for this surface. Because if you do it on this surface, it can damage it and you can spread it. And so we were like, oh my goodness. So we get the car back. Fortunately, I extended the rent day. And so I get back and I am researching and working through, and I get the first one off, and then I get the second one off, and then I build up to the last one, which is the doozy. Because in my head, I was like, okay, this is significant enough that I could make the argument that it's customized. But I don't think Hertz is going to fall for that. That especially if I'm like, we customized it, and by the way, you're welcome, it's free. I'm going to leave now very quickly, but you have my credit card on file, so I can't do that. So I get it cleaned, and I'm looking at it from every angle imaginable, because when I first do it, the green ink scatters, and it grows in 5 times the original stain size. And I was like, oh, junk, I just made this worse. And I finally figure it out and get it completely cleaned up, and I drive it back to Hertz, and I walk away, and they're like, thank you, Mr. Causey, and I'm like, you're welcome. That car was cleaner when they got it than when they handed it to me. But the reason this was so fascinating to me is because this is, I think, the posture of contentment that Paul was alluding to when he says, for we brought nothing into this world, we'll take nothing out. And specifically because of the subsequent passages that will follow, is that me renting that car meant I was responsible for that car. It meant I was responsible for how I handled it and how I returned it. And ultimately, understanding in the grander perspective who Jesus is and what he's done and the life that he's given me, I am responsible for how I live my life. It doesn't bleed complacency. It actually fosters an even greater ambition and a desire to use my life. And to see even more diligently how I can use my time. And one of the ways that I want to challenge all of you today to actually consider one of the ways you can use your time is with our egg drop coming up. Because as a church, we are absolutely committed. When you walked in today, you saw love does on our wall. We believe that what Jesus demonstrated on that cross is love is a verb. It is a demonstration that's done. It's an action. That this world doesn't need more lip service or love songs or commentators talking about love. That what it needs is to see the church do it. Because unfortunately, the church hasn't always, in every area and scenario, done that well. And so we've just always, as a church, said, man, we're going to be known for what we do for this community, not by what we take from it. So that means that there's a variety of different community service things that we'll do throughout the year. But one of the biggest, grandest ways that we just do this is by creating this free day for families to have these memories that really do make their year. I mean, we hear from families regularly who are like, our kids look forward to this event more than any other event throughout the year. Now, here's the crazy thing. This is not an event that someone else puts on. This is something that this church pays for and does, with thousands of people showing up. Because we believe that if people bump up against love, if people bump up against who Jesus is in us, that it can start to redefine who Jesus is for them. And that they can, we're not saying, hey, come believe what we believe. It's more just to, hey, let's just jettison the box you have, because if you're going to reject Christianity, we want you to reject Christianity, not some counterfeit version of that. And so this is where you come in, because to create an event where thousands of people have this positive experience where they start to rethink the church and rethink who Jesus is. And some of you, your story is that because you came to this event, this is how you ended up at this church. That for us to pull off that with thousands of people, we need 100 people saying yes. There are about 40 who've already said that. But I know for many of us in this room that we're still on the fence or we're still working through our calendar. And I want to challenge you on April 1st, whether it's one of you or if you're part of a family unit, whether it's all of you, with your teenagers included, just to say yes and to sign up. And with just a few hours on April 1st, you potentially are leveraging something temporary that could have a significant and internal impact. And if you're interested in doing this, you can sign up at encountereggdrop.com/volunteer, or as you leave today, Jen's going to have some iPads for you to sign up, or with the email that we'll send out today. But for us to be able to do this in a month, we need people who are willing to say yes today to serve that day. Because that's what happens when you start to understand, when you start to live with a perspective, is it starts to free you from this self-oriented paradigm to this other-oriented paradigm. And that ultimately, over the next month, what we want to do is, with Ronald Reed's life, I don't think that is the exception. I think what he did and how he did it can actually be something that's even more instructive for us than we even realize. That there are future generations whose lives can be transformed by how you leverage your finances and by what you do with them. And that's really kind of the heart and the focus over the next few weeks of the Money Talks. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you. Thank you for the privilege to look into the words that you inspired thousands of years ago, the words that you wrote through Paul writing to Timothy. I thank you for their local circumstance that in your wisdom you knew would transcend to almost 2,000 years later to where we are today. And I pray that you would help us to be people who activate contentment in our lives, that you would intentionally remind us this week to celebrate the things that we're tempted to compare. And God, that you would help us to have fresh eyes, to go through the rest of this day more aware of what's already there that we can be grateful for. And we say thank you especially to you, Jesus, and our deepest gratitude for who you are, for what you did, and for what you're still doing for those who turn to you. And it's in your name, Jesus, I pray. Amen. Hey, I want to thank you for being here today. As we close out our day, we just want to leave you with a song to really kind of serve as a reminder that ultimately the way that Paul ended it, that there's a grander perspective, there's a bigger picture, and that when we focus and fix our eyes on who God is, it starts to reorient our lives and how we live it. And so our team is going to close this out with a song that just gives us an ability to just re-anchor in that grander perspective, that focusing on Christ and what he did and what he's able to do can do for us. So I want to invite you to stand as our team leads us out, and encourage you. Maybe for some of you, this is a song you sing, but for some of you, this may be a song that you read the lyrics and let it kind of work through you as you're working through what we talked today about contentment. Or for some of you, maybe in the song, this is a moment for you to practice gratitude and to say, maybe for the first time, to God, God, thank you. Thank you for what you did on the cross. Thank you for the hope that I can have in you. I turn to you, or maybe for some of you today, it's just a moment to say, God, thank you. Here's all the things that are good in my life that I haven't said thank you for. And to use these few minutes that we have left together to say thank you to God for them. So let's sing.
God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. No point of reference, you spoke to the dark, fleshed out the wonder of light. As you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. The stars were made to worship, so alive. I can see your heart in everything you've made. Every burning star, a signal fire of grace. If creation sings your praises, so alive. Syllable empty or void. For once you have spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. And as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath, evolving in pursuit of what you said. If it all reveals your nature, so will I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky, a canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys you, so will I. So will I. If the stars were made to worship, so will I. If the mountains bow in reverence, so will I. And if the oceans roar your greatness, so will I. For if everything exists to lift you high, so will I. And if the wind goes where you send it, so will I. If the rocks cry out in silence, so will I. The sum of all our praises still falls destined in darkness to die. And as you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. Where you lost your life so I could find it here. And if you left the grave behind you, so will I. I can see your heart and everything you've done. Every part designed in a work of art called love. If you gladly chose surrender, so will I. I can see your heart a billion different ways. Every precious one, a child you died to save. And if you gave your life to love them, so will I. Like you would again 100 billion times. But what measure could amount to your desire? You're the one who never leaves the one behind.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Just a couple things before you go. If you do want to sign up to help out at the egg drop, as Chris mentioned, there are iPads, tablets out there that you can sign up to help out. Lots of different things you can do. Dress up as a bunny, stand by a inflatable, a bouncy house, trying to think what it's called, just to, kind of help kids through there. Sort eggs, put eggs out, things like that. I am so sorry, but driving the helicopter is not available. If it was, I would take that job. That, and then also tomorrow night is men's group. If any men are looking for a place to connect with other men, we meet here at 7 o'clock. Men's group tomorrow night. We hope you have an awesome week and that you'll come back next week as we continue this series, Money Talks. Take care and God bless.